It was finally here at the last day of school before summer break. No more mind-numbing classes or lame school rules to follow. Just freedom stretching out for the next 3 glorious months. My crew and I had been fantasizing about this moment since spring break. The plans were pretty typical teen stuff: camping trips, chilling by the lake, backyard bonfires with crushes from school. Maybe finally earning our way into the cool older crowd's notorious woodland raiders now that we'd be upperclassmen. Yeah, the possibilities were endless once that final bell rang to kick off summer vacation. If only we knew how horrifyingly, irreversibly wrong those teenage daydreams would go. How our young, idiotic ideas of rebellion and desire to finally be treated like adults would transform into a waking nightmare beyond our comprehension. It started out as a perfect sunny morning, the hallways buzzing with that unmistakable last day energy. Girls were signing yearbooks and making plans to hang out over the summer. Guys excitedly swapped stories about who they planned to shoot their shot with once school was done. Even the teachers looked unusually lax and casual for once. They could practically taste the lazy summer nights awaiting too. I remember glancing at the clock, 9:18 a.m. Just a half hour until that final dismissal bell at last. Little did I know, that next half hour would unhinge my entire perception of reality itself. That's when the first shattering cracks of gunfire pierced through the air. At first it almost sounded like the start of a celebration, a prankster setting off firecrackers or something equally obnoxious yet harmless. Just another lame senior prank getting out of hand, you know? Happens all the time on the last school day. But this was different. Loud pops echoed in staccato succession from the corridor just beyond our classroom door. Faint screams began to crescendo as the gunshots intensified into the unmistakable, percussive barrage of automatic weapons fire. The realization slowly congealed into one of sheer, unadulterated terror as kids began stampeding past our door in blind panic. This was not a senior prank gone awry. This was an actual shooting unfolding right here in our school. Little did any of us realize, we were about to glimpse the true face of darkness itself. The malign forces that go bump in the night, dwelling hungrily in the peripheries just out of sight. This shooting would be merely our tortured introduction into the realms where nightmare logic reigns supreme. Mr. Hansen, our history teacher, reacted quickly, throwing the door open and shouting at us to seek cover and start barricading the entrances with anything we could find. We shoved desks, file cabinets, even bookshelves to fortify the classroom as best we could. All the while, the gunfire seemed to carry on endlessly. Bangs and deeper, percussive blasts that I can only assume were from higher caliber weapons. It sounded like several shooters systematically making their way through the entire building. Oh God, we need to call for help. Police, ambulances. Mr. Hansen was saying as he fumbled for his cell phone. But even in my hysterical state, I knew better. We were under attack with no aid coming, at least not immediately. No one who could get there fast enough to prevent this nightmare already unfolding. That's when the first tendrils of cold realization threaded their way in. Whatever was happening, it had been meticulously planned. There was a sudden loud crashing thud against the classroom door as our makeshift barricade absorbed the first of what would be many attempts to breach our pitiful defenses. The gunfire ceased in the hallway just outside for a brief, terrifying moment as hushed voices conferred. Then a cackling male voice cut through the deathly silence with, "Come on out, little piggies. We have a surprise for you. Your education is far from over." Another thunderous blast detonated against the door, raining debris around us as we scrambled under desks and toward the corners of the room in blind terror. Over the roaring of adrenaline in my ears, I could faintly make out the gurgling screams of Mr. Hansen as the shooters successfully battered down his defenses. Several heavily armed figures clad in full tactical gear poured in through billowing clouds of smoke and dust. My addled mind can only recall flashes and impressions of the blur that followed. Strobe light-like muzzle flashes, deafening concussions, dark viscous sprays across the windows, Mr. Hansen collapsing to the floor in a mangled, motionless heap. It seemed to go on for an eternity, these heavily armed militants surgically executing everyone in the room one by one. Yet it must have only been a few minutes in reality before the carnage subsided for a new, pregnant quiet to settle. I lay face down in a pool of bodily fluids, not entirely sure if I was even still alive. I didn't dare open my eyes. Didn't dare breathe too loudly. Just lay there as still as death itself. A voice began addressing the handful of us who remained. You have been spared to be our messengers. Do not move. Do not speak. Look upon what has transpired here today and know that everything you thought you knew about the world is an utter falsehood. Heavy boots thudded across the room for a few moments before a clatter of metal instruments hit the floor beside me. I could hear disturbing squelching and tearing sounds, mushing sounds that my mind mercifully blocked from conjuring visuals to accompany. How long this sadistic mutilation went on, I'll never truly know. My memories glaze over those images in a protective fog. Huddled in a fetal position, my body trembled violently from silent, heaving sobs. My entire comprehension of reality slowly came unstitched. Then an odd, acrid smell, like nothing I had ever experienced, pierced the veil for just a moment before that same voice from before rang out again. Drink it in, survivors. Know that this day represents the unveiling of your true world, your one great chance to re-examine the foundations of everything you have been indoctrinated to believe since birth. We are your emissaries from the other side. The real side. And this is only the beginning. More strange sounds followed, along with hushed, unintelligible chanting from the militia. As quickly as they had descended upon us, the sounds of movements retreated from the room until all was quiet once more. At last, it seemed over, until an eerie deep rumbling vibrated through the room itself, as if the very earth itself was revolving open from some slumbering chasm. I cracked my eyes open as smoke began consuming the classroom, reacting with the strange cloying odor that wafted back in. I blinked, fighting against unconsciousness. My gaze slowly lolling across the hellscape our classroom had become. Viscera and chunks of indescribable matter coated every surface. Hastily carved symbols and crude pictographs glistening in fluids splayed across lockers and chalkboards. Then to the sickly amorphous lump that had apparently spilled in from somewhere. Just a gelatinous, writhing pile of flesh, oozing malformed appendages and slick protuberances in a wide radius across the floor. Was that the source of the rumbling and smoke? And were those faint gasping, warbling sounds actually coming from it? As the noxious smoke thickened further, the lump amidst the gore seemed to constrict and stretch violently in rhythm with an unnerving groaning. In my traumatized state, I could have sworn I saw what looked like primitive ocular structures splitting open within it. Were those things eyes? Eyes that seemed to fix upon me as a thunderous bellow erupted forth like a lurching birth? Through violent, convulsive spasms, the twisting mass spewed forth a new unclassifiable protrusion, one that bore a sickening semblance to a gaping maw of jagged fangs and dripping pseudopods flailing as if in search of prey. Survival instincts kicked in as the black smoke and that creature's slobbering jaws expanded through the room. I turned and propelled myself through the demolished windows. Shattering glass and drooping smoke membrane raining around me as the nightmarish bellows and fleshy poundings ricocheted from the classroom behind. Somehow I found myself fleeing across the compound, leaving a trail of bloody footprints in my wake. Never looking back at the macabre scene unfolding where my school once stood. Just running until my lungs burned and legs finally buckled on the sidewalk half a mile away. I survived, yes. But the ultimate truth of that day is something altogether more horrifying than any last day of school massacre the media touted it as. I know now that something much darker came slithering forth to indoctrinate me with the real face of this world. A dimension of suffering and primal terror bleeding over into our own plane of existence. Forever haunting me with the knowledge that the evil we think we understand is but a pale, muted facade for something far older and more malignant lurking beneath. And I am now one of its heralds whether I want to be or not. Forever burdened with glimpsing a reality much more depraved than we could ever dare let our minds fully conceive.